Welcome to After Dusk with Don Piercy, where we're not afraid to talk about things that go bump in the night, with special guest co-host and so much more. We're bringing you the facts versus fiction and the history of it all. Remember, it's always darkest before dawn. Tune in every Wednesday at 10:30 and get your bite. Picking up where we left off on After Dusk with Don Piercy with the continuation from last week. Get your bite on.
You know, we're bringing that because we're not afraid to talk about what goes bump in the night, and you know, and that goes to where, you know, like what you were saying, the pre-Christian and everything like that, and so what else do you have for us? Because I don't know, you know, I know that there's so many speculations and they could be this or they couldn't be that, but the history of them, how long they've been around, and the fact that I seen one and it was terrifying. It was terrifying because I was like, what the heck? You know, and the different types of them. And it's like, how, you know, if they are here, how do we keep them from mingling in our lives?
Right.
That's the question. How do we keep them at bay? How do we keep them from mingling in our lives? How do we know when we meet one in the street?
Well, so back to the question is, how long have they been here? And kind of putting fairies in reference to God, and then gods and goddesses, and maybe you could look at it as a hierarchical thing. So you have God, you have Lucifer, you have the angels in between. Then you have
the Son of God.
then you have
him.
lesser beings, but lesser beings that are gods to primitive man, but that are very powerful. They're like angels, but not quite angels, but they're powerful beings that God is created or imbued with abilities to lead mankind, right? We want to be biblical about it. And then from those gods, right, they created their seconds in command, right? Your fairies or elves, and they were supposed to kind of herd and mold and shape humanity as it formed, right? Because there's, going all the way back to Cro-Magnon man, they've got some inexplicable kind of little paintings where it's like a human, but it's got wings on it.
Right.
You know, like almost like butterfly wings, and there's different kinds of petroglyphs depicting like they're basically like humans, but they're not quite like us. They got like little antennas, and they've got these different things. So the question is this primitive man trying to describe fairies and elves and things of this, or are they describing, you know, alien visitors, right? So we're going back to this thing where and I'll get to that in a second, right? So if you can imagine fairies as kind of like these subordinates of these gods, right? That are supposed to go out and do these gods' bidding, right? Because you're not going to have a human doing a god's bidding. You want to send, that's the very lowest of the chain of command, right? Then that's where you come into some of these heroes, right? You know, in Greek mythology, that, you know, okay, this person is worthy of carrying out my task. So what does he send? He sends a pen, like Zeus sends a pan, right? Or he sends some other form of spirit or a fairy, right, to instruct this human. He doesn't go to this human and say, this is what I want you to do, bro. He usually sends an intermediary, right?
Mm-hmm. So
now if you look at it from like the alien perspective, right, what is God, right? Going back to that. So we can assume there is something out there that has set this into motion. We can assume that angels, if not holy or not magic in the way that we think of it, are super beings, right? They're like kind of evolved out of the primordial soup of the universe. became these super beings, right?
Right.
Then the gods are something that they created, hybrids from like maybe other races not on this planet, or maybe very early man that they kind of molded into these superhuman beings, right? So they're like gods to us.
Mm-hmm.
But it would make sense that these gods, these superhuman beings, like super soldiers, would make foot soldiers, right? Like
Right.
cannon fighters
Right.
out, right? You know, who cares? They're drones, right? There's some sort of, maybe they're just little animated meat puppets for all we know, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then they go out and send the messages to the heroes, to the people, to the ordinary man that they want to groom, right?
Right.
So,
Right.
so it doesn't detract from, so to be clear, I'm not detracting from, like, say, the power of God or a supernatural force. And I'm not detracting from angels, or are they some sort of superhuman, super alien being? And as you trickle down, it's just the question is there's clearly a phenomenon going on here. Whether or not these things are a product of a biblical God in the Christian sense, or any other religious sense, or the workings of some superior alien intelligence, it's clear that we're being interfered with, right?
I
It's
well,
clear
and
there's
I wanted to
something
touch
else
base on
here on
this.
this planet
Mm-hmm.
living with us
Right.
and playing with us, I say, because they're not necessarily
Well,
entirely.
that's what I wanted to touch base on too, is coming out, of the gods and goddesses, and going back to, if you believe in Nibiru, okay, and
Right.
the planet, and to where the Anunnaki, which is like the seraphim, come from, and it had crashed, and part of it floated away and part of it remained, and they say, okay, in the research and all that stuff, is that what was left of Nibiru is what formed planet Earth. So
Right.
everything that is not on this Earth is extraterrestrial. But if the Earth was extraterrestrial to begin with,
Right.
and that was Nibiru, that means that humans were evolved over time and thousands of years. But of
Correct.
course, that goes back to God's plan and making us in His image, and everything of that nature. So they are not made in God's image. And the angels and the seraphim were so hateful and jealous that they were not, that God recreated mankind to make us in His image.
Right.
And that's where, they fell, and
Right.
came and taught us, humans, magic, and how to make things with metal and gold and sorcery and all of that jazz. And that's where the fairies, because if the fairies are descendant of the Anunnaki, and they are an offspring of, because they do come from the land of the giants, and the land of the
Right.
giants, you have giants before man was made, and you know what I'm saying, from before. So there's
Right.
two different types of giants. Don't get them mixed up, because and use discernment when talking about these things, because there's giants of the Nephilim that David slew, David and Goliath, and you have Zeus and the gods and goddesses, but not all the gods and goddesses were giants. Some
Right.
of them were normal size, so maybe some of them are of the Fae race, mixed, okay, which
Right.
they say that a lot of fairies stay around, like, royal bloodline. So and it's like, how can you separate yourself from them but not get too deep into it, but be able to
Right.
stand back and see the picture and say, okay, let's pick it apart. But in reality, everything is speculation.
Right.
So
Well, you're dealing with, so it's a phenomenon, right? You're dealing with, like, if you talk about fairies and like the videos and the pictures that we've seen and that come up from time to time, they're unexplained incidences. And so the
Thanks
question
for
is,
tuning
and
in to After Dusk with Don Piercy. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you enjoyed it, like, share, subscribe, and tune in next Wednesday for the next part in our web series at 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And if you feel fit to buy me a cup of coffee once a month for bringing you this series, you can do so at our Anchor.fm platform under a new podcast. Until next time, keep it real.